Please, a warm Mark Thompson Show welcome for Josh Mankiewicz, everybody. Come on.
Josh Mankiewicz.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, smash it with your iron rod. I mean, smash the like button for Josh Mankiewicz. Josh Mankiewicz, I've known you all of my adult life. And
that's what we're going with?
I'm so gratified every time I come on I come on the show with you, because you raise our game a little bit when it comes to something we don't talk a lot about, which is murder and true crime. But apparently the rest of America is talking about murder and true crime almost nonstop. Dateline is number one. The podcast is number one. You yourself have achieved a notoriety which I find nauseating, but is clearly something that is real. It's not fake. It's real.
There's a giant true crime audience out there. By the way, I just want to say it's a pleasure to be on your show. I don't know that I would have done it if I'd known that there weren't going to be any drops today.
Why don't you just text it?
Yeah, thank you.
John. Okay. John is doing all. By the way, Josh, do you have one of these Mark Thompson coffee mugs, Mark Thompson Show coffee mugs? You can get one like this at the merch site. Did I give you one?
I have a Mark Thompson coffee mug. I have a Mark Thompson baseball cap, and I have a Mark Thompson bottle opener.
Wow. That is the hat trick. I got to say, that is very impressive. That is the hat trick.
Yeah.
Josh, let's talk about murder.
And
by the way,
I'm getting my taxes done by Steve Moskowitz too.
So you know what?
Ding.
Josh, is there a podcast called Let's Talk About Murder? If there's not, somebody ought to start it.
I'd be amazed if there isn't, because I mean, true crime is, I think still is the biggest chunk of podcasts. And there is almost every other permutation of the word murder on there. Like I have a friend who's has a podcast called Murder-ish.
That's good.
There's, every other way in which murder can be used in a sentence, I believe, is now a podcast. If Let's Talk About Murder is not a podcast, it either should be or will be.
By the way, John, permutation is a ding word.
Ding.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And by the way, I can't make it any more clear. I mean, I'm here for the drops, so just let them go.
Feel free to interrupt with the drop. Okay,
right. I mean, mostly I would say interrupt Mark, but it's fine with me if you want to interrupt me. Okay. I've been at Dateline. February will be 28 years. We've been on this is our 31st TV season. So I joined a couple of years after Dateline started. And when we started, of course, we were not doing true crime. We were doing all kinds of things. And we weren't doing just one subject per hour. And I worked here about close to 10 years, maybe a little bit more than 10 years, 10, 11 years before we made this switch to true crime. And when we started doing that, I was not terribly interested in that. Although I had been interested in, I'd been a police reporter at different times in my local news career, but I was more interested in staying with the old Dateline, which was sort of the faster moving 60 Minutes at the time. But we started doing true crime. And so I thought, okay, well, this is clearly the direction that the ship is sailing in. So I'm going to get on board. And then I discovered that I liked it, that, reporting is reporting and writing is writing. And these stories are not only vitally important to the people involved in them, but they also sort of tell larger stories about our society and who we are and what's important and the way our institutions work or don't work. And I did not see this giant wave of interest in true crime out there, but it is certainly there. And I did a little research on this, and whereas you might think, I certainly thought that this surge of national interest in true crime was kind of a new thing. It really isn't. True Detective magazine, which is no longer around, but which was a powerhouse for many, many years.
It was like when did it start? I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
True Detective was first published in 1924. like nearly 100 years ago. And it was followed by a bunch of other magazines. There was one I remember called Master Detective. There was one called Startling Detective. There was one called, I wrote some of these down, Front Page Detective. That one I remember reading. And they were stories of, sort of police procedurals, true stories about the police, or whatever department it was, went out and got their guy. There were different times in which that sort of became more lurid, and the covers became something that you might want to shield from passersby, or you might not want to admit to people that you bought it, sort of the plain brown wrapper type thing. But the stories were always, they were at times salacious, but they were all about true crime. And in the years leading up to World War II and then right after, which was sort of when these magazines kind of had their heyday before TV and radio and now internet and podcasts started, chopping into all that. All those detective magazines had a circulation of around 6 million people monthly. And the population back then in the United States was less than 140 million people. So that is a giant section of the country that was reading about true crime on a monthly basis. And they're still doing it. They're just consuming it in different ways through programs like Dateline and through all those podcasts and elsewhere on the internet. And certainly on social media. You can't go to Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else and not hear stories about this crime or that crime.
But what I'd suggest to you that it's now become mainstream in just the ways that you described. Dateline and other shows like it.
If it's on broadcast TV, then it's mainstream. Yeah,
right, exactly. So it's not a brown paper bag anymore. It's it's almost a water cooler stuff.
Although you when you talk to people, like, people talk about watching true crime programs and listening to true crime podcasts and watching true crime documentaries, streaming them. People talk about it like it's their guilty pleasure. Like, people don't announce that they're doing
guilty
it
pleasure
proudly
you have?
the way,
Yeah.
the way they say, I read the Washington Post every day, or I read Politico every day, or I can't wait to get my hands on the Wall Street Journal. They're like, but then I listen to your podcasts too.
I have a question for you, if I could.
Sure,
what do you think? And I think this is with given your experience and in your reporting, I think maybe you might have some ideas on this, even if you're not aware of the story. What reason do you think that someone would bury an old convertible Mercedes in their backyard?
Well, this is a great story. Now I confess that I may not be up on the reporting of this to the moment, but I was reading all about it on Friday and over the weekend, and I presume there's more stuff coming out today. But I want to know more about Mr. Johnny Liu, whose property it was, and apparently whose car it was. Was there an insurance claim entered? Was it paid off? What did the insurance company think? Was there an investigation? I need to know a little bit more about what's in the car.
Sacks of cement, not mixed
right.
cement.
Sacks of cement, but I want to know. Cadaver dogs alerted, but they alerted in a kind of a way that suggested that maybe there wasn't a body there. Maybe there was just some other kind of something else had decomposed there, or somebody. It could have been any one of a number of things. The landscape guys could have cut their hand at some point on the car. That would make them alert also, apparently, in a minor way. So I want to know more about what the cadaver dogs thought they smelled. I don't know why you would put sacks of concrete in the car. I kind of want to know
who is having that conversation.
Yeah,
right.
That's
What's in the sacks of concrete? I gather that Mr. Liu is no longer with us, but the people that he brushed up against in his interesting life probably are. And I know that he moved up north at some point. I think he was in Washington State, maybe, when he finally passed away. So, I mean, I want to know a lot more about him and the car and the insurance, and then like what other insurance claims he entered over the years too.
See,
And
my
also,
question is,
what else is buried on that property?
that's what I was going to say. Now you got to dig up the whole place because
Yeah,
you got to get the ground penetrating radar out there and figure out what else is buried. Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, first of all, I mean, if I ever own a boat, which is unlikely, but the choices for names are blunt instrument, ground penetrating radar, and rogue wave. Right. Right.
See, that was my theory. Was that this was just to distract from the real location of the body?
Exactly. That's exactly right. No, I would absolutely have ground penetrating radar. I'd be looking all over that place. Do
they not need to dig any place up anymore? They can just start with the radar and then. Josh, the technology progressed to that point?
I mean, it's progressed to that point in the sense that you don't want to have like nobody has the money to dig up that entire estate thinking that maybe there's something else there.
So no archaeologists.
No, and I mean, there's somebody lives there now. Right. They're not going to want their entire estate dug up because some previous owner 30 years ago buried a car. I'm guessing that the cops probably don't want to. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Although if I lived there, I'd want you to find the bodies.
Well, I'd want to know what else was there. So that is why you use ground penetrating radar as you look around.
I wouldn't. I'd say fill it in. Let's get on with life. Put in the azalea bush or whatever we got, and get these people off the property.
And get the topiary. Get the topiary guy to trim the bushes into a big Mercedes emblem.
There you go.
Yeah, hang a light on it. Go with it.
Don't forget your water feature, Mark.
Right?
Yeah,
you want the Mercedes emblem, and then you want to contact the local Mercedes dealership and say, I expect to be paid for this.
Yeah. By the way, John, salacious is a ding word he used before. And Mankiewicz used this, and I don't hear it in conversation, the word whereas. He said, whereas in the past, blah, 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 blah. That is a ding for the use of the word whereas in conversation. Josh, tell us about, you and I discussed, you'll tell me if I need to go to Moskowitz or do anything.
Why are you yelling?
Thank you.
You'll tell me, John Daly, you'll tell me.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Right. Thank you. Josh, you've come on this is a rare day when you have fabulous producer John Daly doing all the drops like this. It's very.
I love this.
Boom, boom, boom.
So you'll let me know when we have Steve Moskowitz. I want to ask you about a specific case. This case that was never.
Steve's here.
Okay. And I'm going to do it right after I talk to Steve Moskowitz. But this is a case that's never been on Dateline and yet reveals so much about the way investigations go. So more with Dateline NBC's Josh Mankiewicz. You can reach him on Twitter at Josh Mankiewicz. He is the Mank, that family Mankiewicz. They are the Mankiewicz in Mank. That
we have two Witzes today.
Academy.
Moscow,
that's right. Yeah.
And Mank.
Moskowitz and Mankiewicz. All right, Josh, please take a seat in the green room for a moment. And right now I want to get to our exclusive sponsor. He is the veteran Bay Area tax attorney. I call him the tax ninja. He is Steve Moskowitz. Normally there'd be applause here, but today we're working without video. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Polite applause is good. Steve also insanely well lit today. He's kind of made a little thing out of, the mystery lighting. But today, Steve, you look great. You can see all the
Halloween.
Well, thanks, Mark. And that's my idea that we're going to put light on the tax law and show.
Oh, I love it. Very well done, sir. Always
get out of the darkness and into the light.
Supposing there's a way to get the light inside the body.
Yeah, if you could do it, you could be part of that research, getting the light inside the body. Steve Moskowitz, I want to talk about government programs that give the audience potentially money. I know you'll do individuals and you'll do business returns, and you've seen pretty much every flavor of tax issue and challenge. But I do want you to include ERC. We dwell on it because this program may not be around forever.
Oh, it definitely has an end date to it. And you'd be really sorry if you missed out. And here's the deal. The federal government is giving away, that's right, giving away. It's a grant. It's not a loan, giving away up to $26,000 for every employee you have that qualifies. And we're going to go over both ends of the scale because you have to watch out for both of them. There's two different ways to qualify. One way is mathematical. It's real simple. And it's, did your gross revenue drop by a certain amount? Yes or no, and that's that. But because it's so easy, a lot of firms are stopping there and saying, if your gross revenue didn't drop by that amount, no ERC for you. No. The law says there's two ways to qualify, and it's either or, so you only need one of them. The other way, it's called full or partial closure, which is a facts and circumstances test. For example, all businesses in the state of California from the beginning of the pandemic until June 15th, 2021, were ordered to not use more than 25% capacity of the inside of their business. Even an essential business like Safeway could only use 25% of the store. That may qualify you. Or supply chain disruptions may qualify you. Or a whole bunch of other things as well. We will take the time to sit down with you and go over it and say, do you qualify? Not everybody does. If you don't, we'll say you don't because of X. If you do, we'll say you do because of Y. And then we want to get you every dollar to which you're legally entitled. But watch out for the other end of the scale. The IRS is actively investigating companies that are committing fraud on this. And they say there's been a lot of fraud here. There's been a whole bunch of pop-up companies. They've just literally just come into existence to file for ERC, and then they'll be gone when the IRS is asking questions. We're a law firm. We've been practicing law for over 30 years. And what I've always said over the air and individually, you should take everything to which you're entitled, no more and no less. So on the one hand, if you're entitled to ERC under either method, even the more complex method, let's get every dollar that you're legally entitled to. On the other hand, you don't want to go to some company that's going to commit a fraud in your behalf, because obviously you do not want to commit tax fraud. That will get you in really big trouble. So the bottom line is you want to be aware of the two extremes. Both of them are harmful. And you want to see, am I legally entitled to this? And if you are, let's get every dollar that you can. And the amount of money can be substantial, because remember, they're giving away up to $26,000 for every employee that you have that qualifies. This can be a tremendous amount for some companies.
Yeah. Sandwich shop, bar, service, industry related business, whatever it might be, reach Steve Moskowitz and at least ask about that situation. And as I've said, as an individual or a business, Steve is a great stop, the stop when it comes to tax preparation. Reach him at 888-TAX-DEAL, 888-TAX-DEAL. Also online, MoskowitzLLP.com, our founding sponsor, the OG when it comes to taxes. Steve Moskowitz, everybody. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Mark. Always a pleasure.
All right. Yeah. I want to quickly acknowledge before I get back to Josh Mankiewicz, some great donations. And you guys can help me, maybe particularly you, fabulous producer John Daly, or Tony.
I can talk real fast.
Okay,
You there? Okay,
yeah.
So here we go. We'll start with JR, starting a fund to buy Mark's new computer or watch.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's
nice.
$8.10. I see what you did, JR.
Yeah.
Very good.
Here we go. We got George Rivera also contributing to Mark's new PC.
Thank you. Thanks, George. Appreciate that. Yeah, we have a major technological mountain to climb.
Walter here with I've got a 5 on it as well.
Nice,
Okay.
Walter.
Very nice, Walter.
Tony, we can hear the show coming back.
Oh, shoot. Oh, hold on 1 second. There. Because I have it running in the background, so I make sure we're always streaming. Here we go. Adam S. for PC for Mark.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that.
We have a Northside Service Company, $25 for a new computer.
Yeah, shout out Northside Service Company.
We should have more difficulties more often.
Yeah, shout out to Northside Service Company. Thank you.
Wait, was this just a ploy, Mark?
Yeah, I think it was. Here we go, real fast. Gail here with thanks for persevering. Appreciate your voice.
Oh, that's
Thanks,
great,
Gail.
Gail. Thank you.
We're a little, we're here.
Here we go. SJ for the Mark.
I love Mark T. You love Mark. How dare you skip over that, Tony?
I guess.
I love Mark T. You love Mark T.
Do you know
We
who
love
I
Mark
am?
T.
Kind
For
of
the
a
new
big
That
computer.
made,
Yes.
that made
Do you
Tony
know who I am?
uncomfortable. That's right.
Of course
Thank
it is.
you.
Also here, John Schneider for some
John
plastic
Schneider
covers.
is another OG
Here
on
Kim's
this
living room
show.
couch.
That's what I need. Yes, so we don't
Plastic
spill
covers
tang on
for
the nice
Kim's living
cushions. Mm-hmm.
And then we'll clear Annie Ziff with $4.99.
Very
Thanks,
cool.
Annie.
Trish
And
for the super
Trish.
sticker, $19.99.
Thank you, Trish, for the super sticker.
Mike Hendricks, $2. Real fast.
Thanks,
here.
Mike.
Yeah.
I want my $2.
Jay Marshall, $5. Thank you.
Thank you.
Janice Chair, $19.99.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shout out to Janet.
All these just drive-bys, man. They're just throwing money.
It's great.
Wow. So nice.
VLL.
Cares Catherine Beer, $49.99. Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine.
What happens when your
shout
computer
out
takes
to
a dive?
Catherine Beer.
Oh, Catherine, that's so nice. People are like, we got to have Mark Thompson. His computer must work. And so now what we have is we see the result.
Joanne Cook,
Joanne.
$4.05. 5 cents. How do they pull
That's
that off?
nice. Thank you.
And Jim Avila with $19.99. Thank you, Jim.
Jim Avila.
There we go.
Oh, to Jim Avila.
I'll take
Thank
myself
you,
out.
everybody. Yeah, we've had all kinds of technical issues.
See, we were worried about Kim's kids, but in reality, it's Mark's laptop.
That's right.
Yeah, as it turns out. Josh is like a telethon every day on this show. We have to pitch a little
Wow.
bit for money because that's
This is
just
very
true
impressive.
in this new environment. You don't have that. You know, you're taking my
getting
town
it.
car to some place. I don't know what happens. You sign some autographs, do an interview, and then,
There's a
you're
helipad.
number one. Yeah, helipad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Choppered from place to place.
I like this part.
We're talking to Dateline NBC's Josh Mankiewicz. He is, he's a longtime friend of mine, very long time a friend of mine. So
When did we meet? I've forgotten.
well, you had graduated high school.
College. Yeah.
And we're on to whatever you were doing after that.
Right.
College, I guess.
Right.
And I was just coming up.
Right. You were
way behind
I
you.
remember going to your bar mitzvah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is wild because I'm not Jewish. It was a wild thing to say.
I know.
Yeah.
I kept waiting.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but
So
might just
many
work.
kids were doing it. I felt I needed to.
I
So-
showed up. I thought, where is he? But yeah.
And then we maintained this relationship, even given the fact that you're so many years my senior.
right.
And
right.
we've had this robust friendship, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Mark.
And now that you're doing this thing that has kind of become a cultural institution, it's exciting to watch it grow. And as I say, it's become this thing that everybody knows in our culture. So now I want to direct your attention to something you first, I believe, told me about. Or
Well, this was the first true crime story that you and I actually focused on, which was many years ago. It was it happened in November of 1986. So Mark was only about like 10 years old then.
But it
worried.
penetrated even my little world.
I was worried about whether it was okay to talk about this with someone so young.
So this was known as the Woodchipper murder.
Yes.
And I mentioned it to my audience the other day. I gave them the broad strokes because it was a fascinating story that we can detail a bit. But what you revealed to me, well, first of all, you gave me a book years ago called The Woodchipper Murder. It was all about it. But I read it so long ago, a lot of the details are foggy. But when you look at the details, I remember it being pretty obvious who killed this woman. I mean, she warned her friends.
Let me give you the bare bones of the story. There was it involved a couple. They lived in Newtown, Connecticut. The husband was a guy named Richard Crafts. He was a pilot for Eastern Airlines, which was then a major carrier, isn't around anymore. His wife was a Danish-born flight attendant named Hella. And Hella Crafts, I think, flew for Pan Am. Also not
She
around.
definitely flew international, right?
Yeah, but she was an international flight attendant. I'm pretty sure she was at Pan Am.
She
She must have been from Northern California if her name was Hella.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but she was actually from Denmark. But she was, and they'd been married for a while. They had a couple of kids, and she had done a lot of the things that that you hear from victims. You hear other people talk about that victims said on Dateline. She had said to her friends, if something happens to me, it's not an accident. Richard did it. They were talking about divorcing. He was a controlling guy. He was, I remember, very tight with the dollar, and she was worried about, they had a couple of kids, and that concerned her. She was convinced that he was seeing somebody else, and she hired a private eye to follow him and take some pictures of him. These, I think, were in the days before no-fault divorce. And she didn't tell him that, obviously, and he didn't know that. So then one day, she disappears. She doesn't show up. Her car is, I think, found at the airport. Again, these were in the days before lots of security cameras, which might have revealed who drove her car to the airport. It was also in the days when local telephone calls within an area code weren't even logged. So if you were in area code 415 and you called somebody else in 415, there was probably no record of that call anywhere. And she disappeared, and he told what would be now her husband, Mr. Crafts, told a story that's sort of, at the time, you can hear it. I mean, it reeks of sort of rich white privilege, which is, I'm a airline captain, and you're just going to believe me because what comes out of my mouth is always true. He told some people that she had left him. He told other people that she had gone to visit her mom in Denmark. He told other people that she'd jumped on a flight to the Canary Islands with friends. And none of this, of course, was true. And he didn't seem to even care about the fact that he told a bunch of different people a bunch of different stories. Then subsequently, after she disappeared, the private eye, who ended up being the hero in this, went to police and said, "This is
the private eye." Just to remind everybody that she had engaged with to track her husband because she felt he was having an affair.
And in fact, he had revealed that he was having an affair. This private eye, his last name was Mayo. Mr. Mayo had snapped some pictures of Richard Kraft kissing another woman outside her house. So one of the things, Mark and I were talking about this the other day.
So he goes to authorities. Go ahead.
He goes to the authorities. He goes to cops in Newtown. And one of the things that is depicted on TV shows and in movies that, from what I can tell, is absolutely true to life. Lots of things are not true to life. The extent to which, detectives end up shooting somebody in the course of an investigation, that doesn't happen very often. The instant DNA results, which can be done by a machine on your desk, that doesn't happen. But one thing that is absolutely true to life is the complete disinterest in what private eyes have found out by law enforcement, because they literally just blew him off at the police department. He said, this woman hired me to follow her husband. She was afraid of him. She wanted to get divorced. She wanted some leverage. And now she has not turned up and no one can reach her. And her friends don't know where she is. And she's missed a couple of flights at work. And no one can understand that. And the cops were like, she's probably just taking a trip or something. She's fine. They were not interested. It was only after he was able to get the Connecticut State Police interested that an actual investigation took place, in which they searched Mr. Kraft's home and found a piece of the carpet cut out in the bedroom. And the housekeeper later revealed that there had been a grapefruit-sized stain on that carpet. That carpet, I think, was never found. But there was some blood on the side of the mattress, which I believe later traced back to Hella. And although there were not DNA tests, but it was consistent with her blood. And then all sorts of other things started turning up. And most alarmingly and salaciously, ding,
Ding.
I'm going to have to do them myself now, apparently.
Yeah, you can do it yourself.
It was revealed that Richard Crafts had rented a wood chipper, and that someone had seen him using the wood chipper at night in the middle of a snowstorm at the shore of Lake Zor, which is near where they lived. And he was chipping what they thought was wood and putting it out into the water. And this guy noticed it because he was plowing the roads, I think. And he ended up going to police. And again, this is one of those cases where if it were not for the involvement of outside people who just thought, I saw something and I need to report this, people who were not required to do so, this whole case might have had a very different outcome. Anyway, police eventually go to the scene of where.
What can you tell us about the scene?
What can you tell us about the scene, Josh?
They go to the scene where he was reported to have used the wood chipper, and they find some blonde hair, and they find some teeth, and they
wait a minute, Josh. Originally, they go to that spot and they couldn't find anything because of the snow, though. I thought.
Well, yeah, they had to wait for the snow to go away.
I like that one detail.
They also looked in the water. Because some of this stuff, he was using a wood chipper to spew things into the water. So they hired divers, and they found a lot of that stuff there. But also the wood chipper, which he had rented, went back to Mr. Woodchipper or whatever the store was.
Woodchipper land, right?
And it hadn't even been cleaned. So I mean, there was blood in that, and there was stuff in that they found in the water. They found a chainsaw. Which someone had thrown in the water. The serial number, I believe, had been filed down, but they were able to restore it, and it matched up with a receipt that showed that Rich Crafts had bought it. They also were able to determine that he had bought a big freezer a couple of days before his wife disappeared. I mean, all of this is just like today, the most obvious signs of him hitting his wife over the head, throwing her in a freezer until she was frozen solid, using a chainsaw to cut her up, and then putting her through a wood chipper.
If you get him in order, you get extra points.
But in that time, like law enforcement was like just sort of, they were in like that dream where you're plowing through molasses and you can't move. I mean, how this was so abundantly obvious now in hindsight, but it sure wasn't then. And they were hampered by something that has always hampered law enforcement and continues to this day, which is there wasn't a body. Now, this ended up being the first successful no-body prosecution in Connecticut. Since then, there have been a lot of them all over the country. In fact, in Los Angeles, there are a couple of DAs that I know of that specialize in exactly that kind of case.
We just had one here in the Cal Poly area, and they held the trial for Kristen Smart.
With Kristen Smart, which is a story that's going to be on Dateline pretty soon. And the Kristen Smart case, in my view, is a much more classic example of the no-body case than this one was, the Woodchipper murder. Because in this case,
this one's obvious because there's pieces of her. Yeah.
In this case, there wasn't a body, but there were some parts of her body, and one of her teeth was forensically identified by a dentist. So then some things that weren't known for a long time about Kristen Smart, which is it possible that they're still alive? Or, where is the body? Because Kristen's body has never been found, and I think maybe never will be found. This was, of course, happened much closer to the time of the actual disappearance. And so a lot of things.
If your blood's on the inside of a wood chipper, your chances of survival are nil.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, straight up, right in, no problem.
Yeah, but because there was no body, prosecutors were worried about getting a conviction, and in fact, they tried the case, and the jury was hung. They did not convict Richard.
That's an extraordinary fact. No. An extraordinary fact.
Did he go free?
They retried him and convicted him at the second trial in 1989. He was sentenced in 1990. Stop, Josh. Let me just say,
And what Josh is about to tell you next about what happened with him, to me, is one of the most galling things. He clearly did everything but sign the crime scene in blood, all right, in terms of all the stuff and the evidence. Josh, what did happen to him? So he was convicted in the second case, sir. Go ahead.
And first of all, there's a degree of planning here, like buying a freezer, buying a chainsaw, renting a wood chipper, using it at a time when you would think nobody would see you.
We have processes, protrocols, and standards.
Yeah,
returning it full of goo. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, this is just not there was some planning going on here. Some what might be called premeditation. That said, in 1990, Richard Crafts was sentenced to 50 years under Connecticut law. He was released from custody in 2020 after serving 30 years.
What?
Exactly.
He was then 82. And this was not some kind of compassionate release because he was ill or something like that. He was sentenced at a time when Connecticut state law allowed for what's called good time, which is that for days in which you do not cause a problem and you are a model inmate and you don't break any of the internal rules of the institution that
you haven't killed anyone else
incarcerated in, you get some time off your schedule. And so he earned a lot of good time. He also got some time credited against that for the time that he spent locked up pre-trial, which was about 3 years. So he did not get bail. So all of that, and the law in Connecticut has subsequently changed. If he were to be convicted of exactly the same crime right now, he would not get any good time off his sentence, and he would still be locked up serving the full amount of time. But inmates are, and this is true almost, I think, everywhere. Inmates are allowed to exist under the law that existed at the time that they were convicted and that they committed the crime. And so, despite the fact that I think they probably didn't want to let him out after only 30 years, he got out. He was sentenced he went to a halfway house for a while. And then I think in late 2020, he left custody, and
he's working in the wood chipper department at Lowe's.
I think he's,
the question I would,
and he says, and I think when you walk into Lowe's or whatever it is, because I don't want to get an angry letter from Lowe's, from a store like Lowe's, he says to you, hey, trust me, this one really works.
Yeah, you don't want the electric, you want to go for the gas powered.
It's so grim and so obvious. I'm astounded he only got 50 years. Today in Connecticut, wouldn't he be going to
in almost
life
any
without the possibility of parole?
Life,
in almost any jurisdiction. I mean, that kind of like preparation and the brutality of the crime. You would expect that person would not ever would be doing life without parole, or certainly would be doing life in which they had to apply for parole at regular intervals, and they would probably be denied.
Right.
Tell me no one else married him. He didn't remarry, did he? Because that's
I don't believe that he remarried. No.
No woman would be dumb enough to marry the wood chipper guy. Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing, to digress for a moment. There are so many of these convicted murderers in lockups who find romances. And by the way, social media has been great for that, or the internet anyway, for connecting with people who end up, some of them have been married while incarcerated.
Like someone who owns a landscaping business?
For example, right? Yeah. Again, I want to know all about that. Like, who buried them? Who buried that car? Now we're changing back to, but one more thing, which is this book this case spawned a book, which I gave to Mark once, because I always give Mark this kind of present, called The Woodchipper Murder. It also was the basis for the scene in the movie Fargo, in which someone is fed through a wood chipper. And it also became, I believe, a plot line in an episode of Law and Order.
I hope he doesn't get royalties for that.
I don't think he does. No, I don't. I think he's, I don't think he profited from that.
Can you, Steve asks on the chat, Josh, on YouTube, you can chat with us. Hey, you can still operate a wood chipper at 80? I got to think he's going to be wood chipper free from here on out. You know,
I think probably others will be clearing any brush on his property.
About 2 weeks ago, this is a lovely story. John says in the chat on YouTube, about 2 weeks ago, a guy in Menlo Park, the town next to Atherton, got killed because he fell into a wood chipper.
That was an accident. I was going to mention it, but it seemed a little like it wasn't a murder. So
I have been around wood chippers a couple of times, and I will say, you don't want to go anywhere near them. I mean, I don't even want to be the person that feeds the brush into them. It looks very scary.
Yeah.
But I'm the kind of guy that would get my tie caught in the shredder, you know? Like I'm not the guy you want clearing brush.
They have a lot of people operating those things have just been trained for like 20 minutes on them. So it's scary. But in this case, Josh Mankiewicz, he was, skilled at what he wanted to do. Although looking back on it, it was the clunkiest thing ever. Everybody knew about it who was part of her life. He left, as I say, a trail of breadcrumbs effectively to his guilt. But then he had a count on, and it worked out for a while that authorities just were ready to dismiss it, dismiss him as a suspect.
Yeah, it's
bizarre.
It is.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was about, we're talking to Josh Mankiewicz from Dateline NBC. You can hit the like button if you would, please. If you're watching the stream, hit the like button. If you're watching the recorded playback of
Why don't you just text it?
Yeah, you can still hit the like button, and you
smash
can still
it with your iron rod.
Yeah, smash that like button with your iron rod. And you can, if you're watching it as a recorded thing, you hit the heart with a $sign if you want to make a contribution. If you're watching right now, it's the super chat where you can leave money to help us kind of ramp up. I want to ask you about
Steve Becker wants to know if this is going to be the feel-good show of the week, Mark.
What I can tell you is this will not be a best of except for Josh's interview, which will be pulled and salvaged from this mess.
Yes, this has been a technological meltdown, but Josh has been a shining light, and we thank him for being here. I would applaud you, sir. I want to ask you in our closing minutes, though, Josh Mankiewicz, about the locals versus the FBI. When the FBI comes in the movie, we're just talking again like what's
real, what's not. Well, that's
the FBI comes in and they sort of, they come in and they kind of go, hey guys, we got this. We're the FBI. Why don't you go take a hike? You know what I mean?
I would say that is definitely another thing that is depicted accurately in TV and movies, which is there is always significant tension, or almost always significant tension between local law enforcement and the feds, who are perceived by local law enforcement often as sort of smug and know-it-all, and they don't share information. They want all of your stuff. They take the clues, they take the forensics, they take all the credit. They don't. They're not sharing anything with you. That's a widely felt belief among local law enforcement. And I've dealt with the FBI a lot, and it's probably true sometimes. It's probably not true sometimes, but there's definitely that prejudice that definitely exists. And I know that it probably goes back a long time. And in many cases, I think it probably makes the Bureau's job a little harder when they're because they really count on local law enforcement to help them out.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because you really do need the local law enforcement to be collaborative.
And gather. Right. They're often the ones who were, first on the scene and do a lot of the early investigative work. So,
but also they don't have well-developed homicide departments in some of these smaller areas where oftentimes heinous crimes are committed.
Depends on where it is, but yes, that's right. So yeah, that tension between the feds and locals is something that's made it into a lot of TV and movie scripts, and that has some degree of truth to it too. But the private eye thing is the thing that I've noticed that again and again, is that private eyes come into the cops in whatever story you're talking about, and they either say, this guy that you arrested, he's not the right guy, and here's the information, or they say, you haven't arrested anybody for this crime. I happen to know who it is. It's this guy. And in both cases, they are frequently told, please get out of my office.
Wild. Well, it's and last thing, the reason that the Woodchipper murder would never be featured on like a Dateline is that there's just, it's almost too obvious.
Well, it's pretty. I mean, first of all, it's abundantly clear who did it, right? I mean today, like it'd be hard to do a 2-hour Dateline about a story like that. There weren't any other suspects. She obviously was not anywhere to be found. Today it'd be much clearer. You don't have to go over the flight manifests by hand the way they did back then. There would be a computer in which you could just search it and you'd know she hadn't left the country. Homeland Security could tell you exactly whether her passport had been used or not. This would all take like a day. So it'd be pretty quick to realize that she wasn't any of those places. He was the only suspect. He'd probably be on some sort of ring camera with the Woodchipper. But also, this is almost too gruesome and bloody a crime to tell on Dateline. We tell stories that are more about the relationships than they are about the murders. And we don't do a lot of serial killers, and we don't do stories. We don't do a lot of sex crimes. We don't do a lot of stories in which kids are the victims, because the audience, you got to think of them too. I mean, you don't want people to
Who is having that conversation?
Right. Give me my murder, but make it polite murder. Right.
Oh, we have these conversations all the time about whether or not the story that we're telling is going to be so upsetting to people that they're not going to want to watch it.
It's why I had to stop watching the show Criminal Minds, because it was just really disturbing. So it's how much can you take? That's what's the line to which I tune out, right?
One of the reasons that people watch true crime is, most people in this country are never going to be victims of violent crime, but everybody has been in a relationship that didn't work out the way they wanted it to. And that is the thing that I always thought sort of draws people to Dateline is, when you're in a relationship with, what you think of as like clearly the wrong guy or the wrong woman, and like you're afraid of them for one reason or another, then what actions do you take? What actions do they take? That to me is much more interesting than the actual physical violence of how people decide they're going to get out of relationships.
Are your episodes always the same length?
They're either an hour or 2 hours. Yes.
Yeah. I love the ones that are super drawn out. And
that would be all of them.
All of them.
But you recap for the 2 hours, and I'm like, I can't go anywhere.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, look,
that's a great tease.
I mean, the ideal episode, for me, is sort of the Law and Order template, which is, the body is found at the beginning, and it looks like it's this guy because he had a vendetta against the victim, but then it turns out that guy's had an alibi. Wait, maybe it's this guy.
It's
wait, he's having an affair.
Right.
It's that sort of thing that makes these stories fun to tell. When the guilty party ends up being the only obvious suspect, I mean, I always, tell our bosses, like, we shouldn't even do that. It's too
boring.
You got to have some.
Your murder is boring.
Yeah, you got to have some.
You couldn't even die interesting.
Were you even trying?
But I've noticed in Act 1 of Dateline, here's a pro tip. When Josh says, Maureen and Robert were married on a beautiful beach and had 2 lovely children.
They had a storybook marriage.
Right, a storybook marriage. And it's like, forget it, dude, forget that, forget storybook, forget all of that. We don't really know, because in Act 2, or whatever it is, he goes, as it turns out, Maureen and Robert had less than a storybook marriage, right? He had cheated before. She had caught him. She was cheating, whatever. Yeah. You and the insurance policy. Act 1 is a lot of misdirect, but they also know that we know that. So sometimes on Dateline, Act 1 is a fake misdirect. It's actually accurate. The great thing about you guys at Dateline is I'm not kidding, you've become super aware of like how we've decoded your formula. And so you change the formula.
Oh, yeah. I mean, somebody wrote to me on
it's
Twitter,
a wild idea.
But it just might work.
Somebody wrote to me on Twitter and said, the first guy you show us is never the guy. So I immediately wrote one in which the first guy was the guy. And we circled back.
That kind of goes to your email inbox, because I wonder, what kind of creepy messages do you get?
Oh, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there. Yeah, we get. Yeah, it's fun.
It's a great dark inbox.
So what model was this Woodchipper?
Yeah, I like my inbox is good. And also, we do a lot of things when we can about disguising whether somebody is in custody. Depending on what correctional institution they're in, sometimes they will let you dress the inmate in different clothes. Sometimes they won't, and they have to be wearing that orange thing, and then it's pretty clear that person is locked up. But sometimes they will let you. There were times when we
go into the stylist.
I remember one, not that, but I remember one time where they said, okay, he can't get undressed, but he's wearing a coverall. He can take off the top part of the coverall when he was wearing. Then he's just wearing a white T-shirt. We went to Banana Republic the day before and bought a dress shirt. We put it on him over his white T-shirt. Then we lit some candles and put them on some ledge behind him. And it looked like, he was in his living room. And I saw the comments go by on Twitter in which people were like, okay, well, this clearly can't be the guy because he's not locked up. And then at the end, you reveal that, in fact, it is the guy. That is sort of the fun part of the storytelling, because we didn't say he's out walking around, but you did think that.
I love what you've done and what you've done with your colleagues. It's amazing. And clearly, it's, as I say, it's part of the culture. And 2020 does their own version, and CBS 48 Hours does a version, but Dateline
not as well though.
No, as I said, Dateline is really the high water mark. It's really that's what everybody's sort of emulating. Emulating is a ding word. Josh, you are so lovely to spend time with us. We're quite challenged today technically, but this part is the part that we'll feel good about. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. Dateline is on Fridays, 9:00 Eastern and Pacific on NBC, and available on the Peacock streaming app.
Yeah, you're everywhere. I mean,
Awesome.
there's also there are 4 other places where Dateline.
Well, there's also Dateline podcasts, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts, or you can subscribe to Dateline Premium on Apple Podcasts and listen to all of them without ads, including my podcast called Internal Affairs, which until recently was the #1 podcast.
Come on, Internal Affairs with Mankiewicz. Love it.
Ding.
Josh Mankiewicz, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again. Thank you, pal. Bye-bye. That was great to have Josh on. That worked out well. It's about all that's worked out well today, except for listening to John do drops today was oddly
That's pretty
gratifying.
good.
Yeah,
That was not how I expected my first encounter with Josh Mankiewicz to go.
Yeah. And you were good. You didn't like a lot of people go, I don't want to interrupt, but no, you went with the drops. You were very well done.